Another compelling, shiny, super desirable $40,000 Chinese ute will shortly deploy here, girt by sea in Australia. Who doesn't want one of those? We're talking about the fun of Tunland, or the ton of Funland. I'm up for either, dude, frankly, but when you look at it through the prism of the Foton Tunland's historical performance here in Australia, it might be better just to teleport the whole operation to a planet far away, where the word fist is a verb. The new Foton Tunland will be here in the third quarter of 2025. It's being imported by the same operation that imports Subaru here in Australia, so I guess there's that. But they haven't had a proud history. This is their fourth crack at coming here, including a failed factory-back operation in, I'm going to say 2016, 2017, something like that. Anyway, I'll have full pricing specifications, engine performance details, bit of a comparison with the Ranger next. This video is only possible because of my two side hustles, which are getting punters just like you and your nana, whoever, your sister, into vehicles cheap. Brand new vehicles. We do that super cheap, and we do it without forcing you to go head-to-head with a car salesman, because let's face it, on the spectrum of uplifting experiences, that isn't one. So we insulate you from that. We get you a great price. There's no obligation. The other side hustle is home solar. We insulate you from all of the cowboys, and we get you a quality system that gets a big tick from an engineer who oversees the whole installation, not me, a real engineer who knows that stuff. And they use only quality components, non-cowboy installers, local support, all of that stuff. Also, obligation free. Just go to the website. I'll put links in the description. And now, the ton of Funland. So on the issue of Foton with an F, they're a somewhat large manufacturer of commercial vehicles in China, but they have failed spectacularly here 3 times out of 4. And the fourth crack at it is fairly recent, so, jury's out on that. Anyway, they kicked off, I think it was in 2012, they had an operation called FAA Australia, which probably standard for Foton Automobile something Australia. And then they went to a TICO, which is kind of Renault and Ram and brands of that nature now. And then, shortly thereafter, they were a factory-backed operation, but the whole thing failed in 2017 due to a lack of fundamental interest and, I guess, also inherent shitboxery. So let us not fail to acknowledge the elephant in the room there, okay? It was a freaking disaster. Anyway, apparently, fast forward a few years, 8 years later, Inchcape woke up from corporate paralysis and said, Jesus, Foton, that looks like a bit of us. Where do we sign? And that was late last year. So about 12 months later, the Tunland, the brand new Tunland, will deploy in Australia. It's not the same Tunland as before because, so much water under the bridge, blah, blah, blah. Inchcape, of course, is kind of infamous in Australia for importing what I would categorise today as the ghost of Subaru, or the shadow of Subaru's former self, whatever, because in my estimation, it's a once great Japanese brand that has been incrementally reamed and ruined by the death of 1,000 cuts from 1 billion Toyota bean counters. This is what happens when Toyota goes, Subaru, let's own quite a big chunk of that. Anyway, Inchcape is, I guess, insulating itself, if you can call it that. It has the poisoned French chalices of Peugeot and Citroën, as well as Deepal, which nobody knows, cares about, or understands, and now Foton. So couple of frogs and a couple of Chinese brands and Subaru. Should change its name to Less Than Best, where you don't pay for any fancy quality. Requiescat in pace, Doug Mulray, #legend. If you're a bit hazy about Inchcape, it's not like a factory-backed importer like Hyundai, Kia, Toyota, Mazda, Mitsubishi. Brands of that nature are imported into this country by factory-backed subsidiaries, like wholly owned factory subsidiaries. Like Mitsubishi Australia is part of Mitsubishi Motors Corporation, kind of thing. Toyota, Hyundai, Kia, etc., Mazda. They're all like that. Subaru, not so much. They're imported by Inchcape, which is an independent company. Here's what they say about themselves. Inchcape, quote, "Our diverse and rich history inspires us to adopt a longer-term perspective," whatever the fuck that means, "contributing to a more sustainable and responsible automotive industry, while generating a positive impact for our customers and the communities in which we operate." I didn't know you could stack horse shit quite that high, because mainly their angle of repose, like it just keeps collapsing on itself. They must have some secret sauce there at Inchcape. What a load of crap. Corporate crap, my favourite flavour. In April, channeling its inner Ron Jeremy, perhaps, who knows, Inchcape proudly announced the imminent Photon ute as, quote, "serious muscle." So Ron Jeremy, despite having only 120 kilowatts from its 2-litre diesel engine, which puts it pretty close to the bottom of the ute pack on performance. And after all, nobody really cares about performance in the ute domain, do they? There's 2 flavours of the new Foton Tunland, the V7 and the V9. There are rear leaf springs on the V7 and coils with a multi-link on the V9 at the rear. So the V7 for work and the V9 for play, basically. I think that's how it basically splits itself. And the hybrid claim that they championed in their most recent press release, in the headline there, how is that bullshit claim even allowed? Got to ask yourself. It's a mild hybrid. So they're calling it a hybrid, but it's really just one of these 48-volt mild hybrid systems that essentially does nothing, or in practice does nothing, except appeal to naked populism among the ignorant, I would argue. It's actually one of those mild hybrid systems, just like Toyota's bullshit mild hybrid system in the new Prado, which works so friggin' well, dude, so well. Oh, what a feeling. It's about as useful to hybrids as the Wonder Bra would have been to friggin', I don't know, Sofia Vergara in the Hollywood cult classic Machete Kills. Brilliant cinematography in that one, but soon to be illegal in the communist capital of Victoria, as I understand it, for obvious reasons, because machetes are the problem after all, even those ones. Foton/Inchcape is saying that the Tunland has a braked towing capacity of 3.5 tonnes, or up to, quote, 3.5 tonnes. Who doesn't want to tow 3.5 tonnes of his and hers commingled effluent round Australia, proudly in a Chinese ute with 120 kilowatts? And only 7 dealers worth of nationwide support at this point, only 2 of which are outside capital cities, let's not forget. We'll get to that in somewhat greater detail if you like, but I went to their website today and checked it out, looked at photonmobility.com.au/dealers, and that's what I found, essentially. So anyway, a dude you've probably never heard of named Glenn Coops is the official talking head scapegoat kind of seat filler for Foton's latest dalliance with failure down under, and he alleged back in April, quote, "The new Tunland is where Foton shows its strength." with 120 kilowatts. Photon have taken everything they know. Pro tip, Coops. Photon has taken everything it knows. A company is a singular entity. This is what happens when corporate communications is played like a game of tennis with no net, I would argue. Everything it knows about building hard-working trucks and packed it into a ute with a capital U, despite not being a proper noun. It's built for how Australians live, work and explore, backed by Inchcape's customer centricity and national distribution strength of 7 dealers, only 2 of which are outside capital cities. Tunland is set to make serious impact, bold, capable and built to deliver. Kind of meaningless statement, isn't it, when you add it all up? At least it is to me, personal opinion. This is the new era of Photon, they say. This is not Coops now, this is just Foton / Inchcape. This is the new era of Photon. Tunland isn't just arriving, it's being unleashed. Fancy actually thinking that writing that in a press release is a fine idea. Like, Jesus Christ, dude. Unleashed. Meaning to release something that was imminently threatening to destroy its cage and escape. As if that is what's actually happening here. This is what happens when PR operatives play the whole game like tennis with no net. Every shot is a freaking winner. Truth is the only casualty, I guess. I almost feel that statement like it's about to be unleashed. I almost feel that in the trousers. No, doubtless you do too. Only not in the front, in my case. National distribution strength of 7 dealers. That's at photonmobility.com.au/dealers today. There's one in Cairns and one in Toowoomba, and all of the rest are in capital cities. And they claim to have 3 in Sydney, but as far as I can tell, 2 of those 3 are the same operation, both based in Smeaton Grange. So there's that. Now, to be fair, so you know that this isn't just a hatchet job where I pull down on the scrotum and lop off the nuts for no good reason, I'd suggest that the new Tunland actually looks okay. It doesn't look shit, which is a barometer of stylistic excellence, in my view, for some South Korean vehicles and nearly all Chinese vehicles. Not shit puts you in the top 5% aesthetically. So there's that. It's got a ZF 8-speed transition. I hate that word. Transmission. So that's not shit either, is it? And it appears to have all-wheel drive capability. Like, it's got an auto switch on the 4-wheel drive system, obviously not in the 2-wheel drive one, but in all of the all-wheel drive ones, which is the top spec of the bottom one, the V7, and both specs of the V9. The bottom spec of the V7 is just rear drive, so it's just your delivery ute kind of thing. But the 3 more high-spec cars all have an auto switch, at least according to their specs. So that implies at least that it's got an all-wheel drive mode, which puts it in front of vehicles such as, I don't know, the Hilux, for example. This mild hybrid business, however, is so frickin' cynical. It's just so they can trot out the H word and make it appeal in a popular way to people who are just ignorant about cars, and they think that's the same as, like, I don't know, Kluger hybrid or something. Pro tip, it's not, okay? Foton / Inchcape says, quote, coinciding with this milestone of trying again, presumably, down under, despite Einstein's claim about insanity, running the same experiment over and over and hoping against hope for a different friggin' result. Despite this milestone, Photon Australia is pleased to confirm a rapidly expanding national dealer network off, admittedly, a low base, with representation already secured across New South Wales, Vicwegia, Queensland, South Australia, the ACT and Western Australia. with even further growth planned ahead of first vehicle arrivals. Imagine that. What are we going for ultimately? 12 dealers, dude? Like, maybe 15? How many extra capital city dealers, I wonder? Wouldn't that be fun, to be in Kununurra with a Photon poopy in its trousers and the nearest dealer in Perth? You'd be making friends and having fun in that city, I'm sure. You could write the shortest book on earth, couldn't you? Things to see and do in Kununurra. Who would want, if you're a dealer, would you want a Photon franchise? Like, really? Would you want one? Or I wonder if Inchcape is just trying to jam as many Photon franchises down the necks of unsuspecting Subaru dealers as they possibly can. Like, dude, take one for the team. Fly the Photon flag. Who knows? They also claim they've done local testing and tuning. Imagine that. Tens of thousands of kilometres. According to them, tens of thousands. Imagine it. Dude, what was second prize? Now, on a positive note, all the 4x4 ones come with a rear diff lock. The V9 version adds V2L, which makes it sound positively electric and new energy, doesn't it? Although, when you read the fine print, it's 300 watts of V2L, so you can look at a domestic style GPO outlet like a power point in the car, but you can only pull out of it 1/8 of the electricity that you can get out of, one of the power points at home kind of thing. So there's that. It's got USB-A ports at the rear. Nothing says currency, technological front-footedness quite like having a USB-A port anywhere, does it? Coil sprung rear, I guess that's okay. For ride quality, potentially, as long as they don't just have this philosophical farm truck tuning approach back at head office, which frankly most Asian car makers do. And heated front seats for the V9 model as well. So not much use up there in Kununurra. Top spec V9 has a front diff lock, roof rail, sunroof, privacy glass for the Guantanamo spec sort of rear seats. It's got facial recognition too, whatever the fuck that means. Probably means the ADAS can be even more annoying. Who knows? Anyway, I would argue that Foton is something of a shaky brand, like based on the objective evidence of its performance in Australia to date. Basically, the top spec Tunland is kind of $20,000 cheaper than a Ranger Wildtrak 2-litre, like the 4-cylinder diesel one with a twin-turbo engine. It's about 20 grand cheaper than that. It's got a bit more kit, like a bit more fruit, but 34 kilowatts less engine than the 2-litre twin-turbo in the Ford and 50 newton metres less torque. So there's that. Bit less clearance, bit less weighting depth. 350 millimetres longer though, so it's a bit bigger. It's wider and taller also, so it's bigger in all three dimensions, including the wheelbase, so the rear seats might not be quite as gitmo as some of the establishment utes in its favour. Just under 1,000 kilos of payload, which is probably there so that they can offer it with a novated lease so that it doesn't engineer itself out of the novated lease compliance zone, which needs to be payload under 1,000 kilograms, otherwise you can't do one. And this alleged 3.5 tonnes of tow capacity, which is pretty much bullshit for all of those sized utes, like a bad idea, in other words. But when you're talking about 120 kilowatts. It's going to be a slow old round Australia trip, isn't it? It's going to be available in the third quarter. The base 4x2 is 40 grand. The top spec 4x4 is kind of 50 grand, but that's before on-road costs, right? So it's important to factor in another $5,000 to $8,000 to get it on the road, I guess. According to Foton, quote, our vision, their vision. It sounds positively supernatural, doesn't it? It's almost like reading the Bible. Our vision of the burning bush, speaking to that dude one day. Our vision is to shape the future of commercial mobility, ensuring that businesses Their employees and customers can enjoy seamless and rewarding experiences. Another meaningless piece of corporate bullshit arrived at, doubtless straight from an advertising agency at great expense, that adds nothing except column inches to the awareness of Photon and what it fucking stands for. Now, how do we compare it to something else that's failed multiple times but might be a better bet? I would argue that KGM Sanyong, which used to just be called Sanyong before it went bankrupt at infinity times, is a brand with a track record every bit as dodgy as Photons in this country. Says, I guess, they look at that Photon release and they say, thanks very much for doing this, dudes, because Inchcape is giving a 45-ish, I guess, 46, whatever, $1,000 drive-away price for the base 4x2 Tunland at the moment. But today you could get a drive-away without negotiating. You can get $46,000 drive-away for the top spec Musso. The top spec, 46 grand, versus mid to high 50s, I suppose, for the equivalent Tunland. And even if it's a better car, the Musso is like $10,000 cheaper, and Musso's 2.2 is more powerful, albeit by a sort of, bee's endophallus, but more powerful. And they have 50 dealers for KGM Sanyong versus friggin', I don't know, 5-ish for Photon. Like, it's only like 700% more or something, isn't it? Anyway, they got 7 for Photon, so it's 700% more dealers. Like, Jesus, 50 versus 7. Just remember, dude, if you buy a Tunland, you become a lab rat in a mad experiment that could end badly. And let's not forget the last 3 clinical trials ended badly. So do you really want to be that lab rat? The life of a lab rat does not end well in the majority of cases. And you got to go into this not saying to yourself specifically, you got to not say it's just like a Hilux, only cheaper. In fact, in terms of longevity in the market, stability, resale value, things of that nature, it's anything but.